Let's get this party started, guys.
All right.
All right, so what's happening, everybody? This is keeping you connected with the Access Networks team. We have Bryce, Nathan, and Bobby G, and Alicia. So we are here to have some fun conversations during these trying times and also have some fun. So, guys, I'm going to ask you all some questions that I get asked regular while on the phones and dealing with our clients day to day. So let's kick this thing off. I want to start with range. Now, this is, I always talk with Nathan about this. This is a wide conversation when we talk about RF energy, the range of RF energy, whether we're in an outdoor or indoor scenario. So, Nathan, let's kick it off with you. How far is the range of an access point? This is what I get asked all the time, right? So let's start it from like an indoor perspective.
So an indoor access point by itself can cover up to 2,000 square feet. So approximately 25-foot radius and keeping you at current data rates. So you're fine if it's centrally located in a 2,000 square foot house. If you're going into a house that needs multiple APs, then you need to have overlap coverage between them, a minimum of 20%, which ends up being around 1,500, but with proper overlap and 802.11ax or Wi-Fi 6, you need to be about 1,300 square feet per AP or 30 to 35 feet line of sight between your access points.
Cool. And I mean, our main goal is always to help an integrator when they're going into a job, and we support the integrator. So Bobby, from your point of view, adding on to what Nathan said, what information would you give to our clients and other integrators around the country that are installing Wi-Fi and, you know, more than usual lately due to like the circumstances going on around the world?
Well, the thing I would always tell everyone is like, make sure you ask a lot of questions to your client, meaning find out exactly what they're looking for. One of the things that from some site surveys, as well as a recent site survey, the client wasn't asked exactly what he was looking for. And we had to go in and help the integrator go and move things around so that the homeowner could actually get exactly what they're looking for. And that was Wi-Fi calling. So one of the things that you want to do is make sure your system design reflects what your client's looking for.
That's a good point, system design, and that's what we're here talking about today. Since I kind of mentioned that earlier, we just got into right to keeping you connected, but we want to make sure we help everybody actually stay connected, but deliver great designs that actually work through these trying times. So, Bryce, from your perspective on the sales side, how should we be selling these networks to end users to enhance their environments?
You know, it's actually an interesting question because I just got off a phone call before I got on this meeting regarding a site in Texas where the end user's request is 75 acres of Wi-Fi. So the integrator's perspective on that before talking to somebody that's involved with access networks from the sales side was he needs 19 access points. And so I said to the salesperson, I said, how did you come up with 19 access points? Like, what's that based on? Well, no, I just thought that would cover, okay, well, there's some math involved here. So, you know, we went back and ran the math, and it's like, even if you go light, you're looking at, you know, 1 access point per acre in a triangulated format, if you wanted to try and focus in on 2.4. So a lot of times when you're talking to the end user, it's not just about, you know, what they want or the you know, what kind of coverage area you're looking for, but it's actually the reality of the math is what it comes down to. The math only works one way. You know, you can't make up things and get the result you want with made up information. So it's really important to make sure that the people that are designing these systems have the understanding behind how the math works.
Nathan, you want to add in on that math part there a little bit?
Look, what Bryce said is exactly what it is. When I talk to people and they ask the questions, they want to come up with a solution because they think it can be this and think it can be that. But the reality is the math is what it is. Your coverage area doesn't change. So proper network design starts with understanding the math and using those numbers to create your overall picture for wireless coverage.
Yeah, that's why we have heat map software, because heat map does all the math for you. That's the whole point of it.
I mean, if you look at the things that we've gone or we've done, emergency, site surveys where there's major problems and we have to come in and fix them, 90%, probably 95% or higher of the issues we find were from not following basic guidelines, not putting one access point for every 1,300 square feet, not mounting your access point to the ceiling dome down, not being aware of how your RF coverage patterns are going to be. If you follow those basic design criteria, you will solve most of the potential issues you're going to run into.
Indeed. Bobby, you look like you want to say something.
No, that's exactly what it is. I mean, numbers don't lie. I feel like Jay-Z when I say that. Numbers don't lie. Sorry. No, it's basically, it's, if you don't follow the basic design criteria for an access point, you can't make it do something it wasn't designed to do.
So
we try, but it's not going to work.
Yeah, we're talking basics. Maybe we should start there. What are these basics? Maybe some integrators don't know. Like you said, they came to you and said, we need 19 access points, and who knows where that number came from. What are the basics, guys? Where do we start?
Interior access points, start with, so like I said, 1,300 square feet per access point. You design for 5 gigahertz coverage. When it goes to exterior access points, there's always a question of, do you need really high data throughput outside and you're planning for 5 gig coverage, or do you just want to stay connected and you design for 2.4? 2.4 is going to give you a significant increase in coverage area. Basic design criteria if you're doing 2.4 is triangulation, so 1 AP at each point of the triangle and 250 feet between each access point. That's your basic math. If you're going to 5 gig coverage, you need to cut that in half and go down to 125 feet per leg of the triangle. That's your basic starting point on any project. Then we start to incorporate building materials, trees, obstructions, things like that, and you'll modify based on the environment. But from an overall basic perspective, there you go. If it's a 6,000 square foot house, you automatically you're going to need 5 access points plus whatever exterior you need. If you're doing a property that's 300 feet wide and you want 2.4 gig coverage, you're going to have one across these different areas based on the footage between the APs.
Yeah, I think the basics of this are is really what it comes down to is get trained. That's where I think a lot of integrators have a very good understanding of a lot of different things, but being proficient in one specific thing requires training. So you can go out and you can be good at all of these things, but if you want to be a master of those things, you need to end up getting training for those. And specifically when it comes to this part of it, the Wi-Fi design, there is very specific guidelines, and getting the training from whoever it is, whether it be Access Networks or some other renowned, known resource, that is part of the basics. That is part of doing what you as a as an integrator and as a company and as a professional should get done. You should have the training. We do a lot of training within Access to make sure that our people know what they're talking about and have the credentials and the knowledge to back it up.
Yeah, I think Bobby is seeing this as he gets more in the field too, is it's not just the access point locations. It's the rest of how everything else is designed as well. If you're doing exterior APs that are away from the house, you should have fiber running to those APs. The AP should hopefully have fiber that can run directly into the AP. When you're bringing all your access points back to your switches, you want to do it in such a way that it minimizes latency. So you want to make sure your network designs are from the ground up designed to handle this. You want to make sure that all of your category cabling that you're using, you're actually certifying and verifying that it's functioning correctly. I can't tell you how many support calls we get where somebody is, oh, it's not working right. Well, go test the wire. And something they've been battling with for weeks is as simple as not having tested a wire when it was terminated. So it really gets down to the basics.
Bobby, have you been running into that on some of your new ventures, going out with Nathan on these site surveys?
Yes, I have. It's humorous, but it's not, because it's like you think it's a given. You think it's a given. It should just happen that way, but it's not. And when it doesn't happen, you just kind of like sit there and smile and say, yes, we can make this work, but you need to do these things.
Or even like what Bryce said, a lot of it's education. We ran into a situation where we had a access point that somebody had put in a location thinking it would work without considering that the interior designer placed a piece of 1/4-inch aluminum directly over where the access point was mounted. This became a significant barrier to that RF energy going through the environment. And you get really wrapped up in different testing and different troubleshooting, and sometimes you don't take that step back and go, oh, I bet if I move the AP a foot, this will resolve these things. And so sometimes it takes an extra set of eyes, but a lot of times it just takes taking that step back and thinking about the basics of how things work and going, okay, what could be incorrect, or what can I fix about this to make it work better?
Right, as well as making sure if you are deploying a 5 gigahertz network, to make sure you turn on the 5 gigahertz on the access point.
Yes, as simple as that sounds, we also faced that on a situation where there were holes in 5 gig coverage, and when we went through, the integrator had inadvertently put APs that they had configured for a different area in there, and there was no 5 gig turned on in certain areas, and so absolutely there were holes in coverage. So sometimes it really is getting back to the basics.
This brings me to another topic that a lot of clients will call in and ask about, like throughput. They say, hey, my customer, they have this much from they're supposed to be getting this much from their ISP. They're seeing these uploads and these download speeds. And that could be a whole bunch of variables happening within their Wi-Fi environment, right? So each access point has a different level of technical throughput on an access point within the specs. And sometimes a lot of clients expect to have the highest level of throughput on their 5 gig, but don't, think about what's happening in their environment that could affect that. So what do we say to that? How do we help people around that part? There's your sign. If you don't know, it's back to math again. So Bryce, kick us off with the math again.
Actually, I want to make one quick statement before he gets into math. Think about right now when the 4 of us were here in this conversation. We needed to wait for you to finish before another person could speak. Otherwise, it would have been completely interrupted. That's how Wi-Fi works. Only one device at a time can broadcast so the AP can understand. And when the AP broadcasts, all of the devices have to listen, exactly like we just showed there. So that's step 1 in understanding why your throughput is going to be different than what your connection rate is.
Can I piggyback off of that? Okay, because it also depends on the client device, how well it can hear in order for it to work well. So again, basic.
Yeah, the math is the math. Nathan in his trainings goes through the math, and Bobby will be doing those as well. And you go through the math, and it's funny because when we do those trainings, you're sitting there in a room full of guys that are proficient at their jobs, and they have a basic understanding of how all these things should work. And you sit there and you watch, like, it's almost like a cartoon where the light bulb just goes bing, and then the next guy bing, and then bing, 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 bing. and it's like all of these light bulbs, and then the room's really bright, and you're like, what the hell is going on? And the reality is that the math doesn't lie. And when you take the math and you break it all down and you show them how it works, and then their client comes to them and says, why aren't I getting a gig download on my iPhone 7, or they didn't even have that, 6, my iPhone 6, why aren't I getting gig download? And it's like, well, it's not actually capable of ever doing that. It doesn't.
We get that. Why aren't I getting a gig download on my iPhone 11?
Right.
And the reality is, with most of your system designs, the maximum connection is going to be 866 meg, which your throughput for all wireless devices, the best equation that really summarizes it is 1/3 of whatever your connection is. So if your iPhone is getting 280, 300 meg throughput, it is working to the best of its possible ability. And you're connected at 5 gig. If you take that same device and connect it at 2.4, you're going to be down around 60 meg, 70 meg, maybe 100, but you're right in that it's going to be that low and that much of a decrease in performance by going from 5 gig to 2.4.
So my question for Nathan is, what are you doing on your phone that you need 300 meg download?
That's a really good question. Bobby, if I'm watching 4K Netflix, how much bandwidth do I need for 4K Netflix?
25.
25 meg is all I need for 4K Netflix. So the reality is we're trained and everything barrages us in life to say, oh, I have to have more speed. I have to have this. I've got to have a car that can go this fast and do all these things. But what are we really doing? What are we really using? The fact is our devices use very little bandwidth to do the things that we want to do. And it's not about the individual device performance. It's about multitudes of devices all trying to simultaneously use a connection to the internet from the house or the wireless connection to the APs. And this is where having access points that can handle, 512 concurrent conversations, having the right wiring to an access point so you have a good, gigabit backhaul. This is why you always hardwire all of your access points, period, because you want to have a great connection on a wired connection between that access point and your core of your network so we can get to the internet the most unfettered way. So it's all based on math.
Math. Bryce, bring back your sign again. That was pretty awesome.
That was awesome. That was awesome.
We do that. When we get into training, we literally say, okay, this is going to be our fun with math presentation.
It is. And everyone's like,
Yeah, and you can see their heads spinning.
coffee,
But then
guys. Get your coffee.
yeah, when Nathan connects all the dots at the end, everybody goes, oh.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
This is a demonstration of our ACE trainings happening right now.
What's funny is it correlates to so many things, though. Even when you get into the hardware side of it, how many devices are using the network, how many devices are sending constant information across the network. I mean, if you're doing IP cameras, they're constantly flooding data across the network. If you're just using a phone to look at web pages, it's just little bursts here and there. If you're using Wi-Fi calling, okay, this is a dedicated connection. If you're watching a live stream or gaming. So there's all these different ways of using the network, and it's why we design our networks that way. We ask what devices are going to use the network, and then knowing how those devices operate allows us to design a network to support those devices optimally.
Yeah. And so this was a great segue, Nathan. You would think you knew my questions. But the next question is Sectorize APs versus omnidirectional APs. Let's talk about that because that is a question I get pretty often. And, these APs can be used in different environments, and sometimes you need a sectorized AP. There's no way around it. You have to direct that RF energy exactly where you want to put it. But in these times, people are at homes, they're crowded, they have all their kids home, they have, husband and wife are home or spouse, everybody's in the house now or trying to maybe go and work outside if they live in nice places like Bobby, you're working on a patio. Let's talk about, sectorized versus omnidirectional access points. How are we designing systems and incorporating the different types of models and the different series we have with designing Wi-Fi for homes?
And so specifically, this is outdoor, right? So sectorized doesn't exist on the indoor access points. And we have these conversations from the sales perspective quite a bit with integrators because a lot of them just want to stick omnidirectional all over the outside of the house and to cover like the front yard, the backyard, the side yards. They put one on each corner, and they're not at all contemplating the fact that access point is still in an omnidirectional model, a 360-degree output. So it's going to bleed back into the house no matter what the house is built out of. So obviously there's certain types of house that would be harder for it to get inside, but there is some potential for that. So if there's an access point directly inside the wall of where the outdoor access point is mounted, then they can compete. They can butt heads with each other. So from that perspective, what we talk about is the different types of sectorized and what the orientation or what the spread of that output is, and how they can utilize it in their design. And actually, and Nathan experienced this with a narrow beam, that you actually can tilt it a little bit, and you can lose on a sectorized. You can actually lose coverage underneath it if you have it tilted at an angle that it's not outputting. So, real quick, I want to touch on what these things were designed for originally, just to give some context. And that's for stadiums. It's the whole concept is high density areas where I need to really pinpoint my coverage so that in a vertical or horizontal fashion, so that I don't bleed into the next section. So think about a stadium full of sections of seats, right? I've got section, A, section B, section C, section D, and there's 1,000 people here and 1,000 people here and 1,000 people here. Well, I can't just put AP next to AP next to AP in omnidirectional format in those areas, because they're just going to butt heads. They're going to overlap. You're going to have all kinds of issues. So what I want to do is I want to narrow down my output pattern so that I can push it directly into the area of the section that I want to cover. Then I can put APs very close next to each other. I can really get them close next to each other and create a higher device capability. So I can handle more devices because I have more access points.
Good point. Good point to have. Nathan, your perspective?
Everything Bryce said is exactly correct. I mean, I've always been a fan of also using sectorized APs on the perimeter of a yard firing in. One of the things that we always fight in projects is how much bleed over we get from the neighbors into our property. So if I have an omnidirectional AP on my house shooting all directions outward, not only is it penetrating into my house and interfering with the interior APs, but I'm also bleeding way over to the neighbors' yards and things like that. If you can go along the perimeter and mount poles and have APs that are firing into the property, you can minimize your effect on your neighbors, and you're also directing that RF energy back in towards the house, so when it hits the house, it's at a lower rate. So you can more accurately kind of plan that RF propagation throughout the property.
It's the same principle that they use a lot of times for audio, in backyard audio design. It's the same concept as Wi-Fi.
And Bobby, you putting any of these outdoor access points on your patio, getting ready for summer? What's going on?
No, not yet. I'm still waiting for one to fall off the back of the truck.
There you go.
Special.
But I'm interested to see what you run into in your new role. Everybody knows Bobby G, but now that you're stepping into this role with Nathan and taking on technical training and site surveys, I'm interested to see as we move into these, warmer months, what you run into on these surveys when you're going into design for the outdoor Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I'm excited too. There's a big project that Nathan's going to just let me get back into. Hopefully he's going to come with me because it's a lot of acres that I have to walk. Please.
Yeah, we have to. So in the past, I've done 6 acres of seamless Wi-Fi calling. And now we've got a new client who just kind of threw down the gauntlet and said, oh, that's only 6. I want 10 acres of Wi-Fi calling.
Please.
So there's welcome to the next fun and games.
Yes. And they do have some access points out there already that are sectorized, and they're all incorrectly named. So
not all.
Yay.
But yeah, that's the other thing. When you talk about
bleed over into the house.
Well, and what Bryce was saying, remember what these things were designed for. If you talk a lot of the other omnidirectional outdoor APs, they were designed for city coverage. How do you mount them in a city? You mount them up to a street pole, going down and covering a large area, people walking down streets or driving, things like that. If you take that same access point and mount it a foot off the ground, you're not going to have the same coverage area. So as with everything, like you said, it comes back to the math. It comes back to how you install them.
What if you have a Get Smart shoe phone?
Then if you're standing right next to the AP, you're going to have amazing Wi-Fi calling. But if you walk away, your foot might get wet.
There you go.
I like that, Nathan.
So while we're kind of talking about placement, right? Another question I get a lot is, do I place my access point horizontally or vertically?
Bobby?
So each of these access points are made to be mounted on the ceiling, right? I mean, that's just how every single access point is made. Once you place it on the wall, it completely changes the pattern of what you're expecting. And you can see that on heat maps. You can do predictive heat maps all day long, and you see exactly how that RF energy has completely changed, as well as the range that you're expecting the RF energy to roam into the home, right? Or into the space that you're trying to cover. So yes, you could do that. Is it recommended? Not really, unless it's designed to do that. So if you're trying to cover hallways, if you're trying to cover stairways, yeah, that makes sense. But if you're trying to cover a room with Wi-Fi calling, video streaming, something that requires a lot of bandwidth, I would definitely not recommend that.
I run into this question a lot with people who are like doing outside designs with like cabanas, and they can't hang them up on the ceilings because the client doesn't want to see them and things like that. So it's constant question. Nathan, well, I mean, you're smiling. You got something to say. You always got.
I was an integrator for 20 years, and Bryce has faced this. I face this. We all have. And the fact of the matter is, they don't like the smoke detector on the ceiling either. But they know if they put it in a drawer, it's not going to perform the way it's supposed to. So, end of the day, you can either have the performance you want or the aesthetics you want. You make a choice. If you don't care how it performs, fine, hide it, put things away. But if you really want it to perform, math is math is. You can't change that. It has to be exposed, or generally exposed, not behind much material. And it's got to be in a certain area to cover the given space that you're trying to use it in.
Yeah, the only difference between ours and smoke detectors is generally if you hide the Wi-Fi device, it doesn't lead to death. So there is a bit of an
extremeness here. I get it.
Smoke detectors, again, Nathan's point is that smoke detectors are socially acceptable in high-end residential applications.
Yes.
And if you put it in that context, a lot of times the Wi-Fi will suddenly become, the access points will suddenly become socially acceptable to be mounted wherever the technologist, I hate that term, but wherever the technology dude decides that access point should be mounted. So I actually just went through this with a friend of mine. I walked into a room and I said, you should put the access point right here in this room. He goes, I don't want it there. And I go, this is a smoke detector right there. And I guarantee you don't walk into the room going like that. So he's like, good point. So anyway, it's becoming more and more accepted to have these things in a visible location, just because performance does suffer sometimes if they're not, depending on how the home's designed.
But let's actually address it on one. Let's say aesthetics is super important, and the flip side of that says, okay, if this is my proper location to put it, maybe I can move it. But by moving it, maybe it means I need to add 1 or 2 additional access points to provide the same coverage for the same area. We sometimes forget that we're not, the ones that are paying the bill for this whole thing. And somebody may say, look, I don't care what the cost is. If I can not have to see that access point, I'm much happier. And in that case, maybe we are outside and we can put a sectorized AP hidden in the bushes away from the pool, or an omnidirectional hidden into, whatever it is. We might be able to add additional APs to have the same effect, and just be aware that if they're willing, if it's that important to them, sure, we can come up with a solution. It just might not be as inexpensive as the first solution was.
Yeah,
correct.
Nobody wants to see access points in their cabanas.
Well,
they also don't want to see big hairy dudes in Speedos, but
that's what I don't.
Sometimes these things happen.
That's exactly what I don't want to see.
All right, on that note, we're going to go to the next question. So, when do we bring in a wireless controller into the picture? Unleashed, we sell a ton of it, and a lot of people go for the Unleashed without the controller. When are we bringing controllers into discussion? Bryce, kick this off from the sales point of view.
I'm going to answer this from the sales point of view. Every time, it should be pitched every job that you're putting access points in. There is zero reason to not pitch it to the client. The old school, top-down selling. Top-down selling means you're starting with the best product you can possibly provide to the client, and then you step down. Now, there's this fine line between I'm going to price myself out of the project, right? So you've got to be aware of these kind of situations. If you're selling the guy a TV and you're in there trying to sell him a $5,000, 2 access points and a wireless controller, and his TV is $900, then yeah, okay, it's probably not going to work out in your favor, or it's the best attachment sale I've ever seen, one of the two. But the concept is top-down selling. So you start with the controller in every project and let them tell you no. Let them tell you, what reason would I not, I don't want that. Let them tell you that, instead of saying assuming that they don't want that. You know, you don't walk into a Mercedes dealer and they assume you want the C-Class. You walk into a Mercedes dealer and they're going to, here's the S-Class. Which one do you want? Well, I can't afford that. Well, here's the E-Class. Which one do you want? Well, I can't afford that. Well, here's the C-Class. Which one do you want? That's how they go about it. So now, as far as having the stuff to back it up, Nathan and Bobby are going to give you that information.
Bobby, Nathan,
Bobby, go first.
Give us the benefits on why this is important, not just for
the biggest benefit of this is if you have an issue ever, you can actually contact our amazing team for support, and they'll be able to remote into the system, take a peek at what's happening, see if there's any kind of rogue devices on there, and help mitigate a lot of those issues that you're running into. A lot of times what you'll see is that some of the guys won't turn on the robot inside the wireless controller, which will change the channels, right? So you'll have co-channel interference. That's a big thing. Especially when you have a situation where you have a lot of access points in a home and you're trying to make the best coverage, right? So those are some of the things that you'll see that a wireless controller can do for you.
Yeah, I think, I was an integrator for a really long time, and how do you effectively support your customers? If every time your customer calls and says, hey, what about this? Hey, what about this? Your response is, okay, I'll send a technician. Well, I just need a simple question answered. Nope, I'll send a technician. When he gets there, talk to him. That's not going to be, it's not a good way to support your customer long-term, both for them or yourself. So having the tools to either, one, use products that you don't have to reset and that are going to be stable, and two, having the visibility into a project to when your customer calls with a question. It doesn't have to be a complaint. It can be a question, or can we do this? Can we do that? If you've got the visibility into that, wireless controller to see what's going on and to know how to adapt for what their requests are, you can do that with a wireless controller. Unleashed gives you better visibility than a lot of prosumer products, but it's not going to give you the full depth of visibility and granular control that you get with a wireless controller. Additionally, the wireless controller provides a lot more hardware to analyze and adjust this network to the changing needs that are happening in there. You're going to have interferers from your neighbors. You're going to have rogue devices. You're going to have odd things happening. And the resiliency of your network is based on its ability to adjust to those changing factors.
Yeah, a lot of times it's about long-term serviceability. That's the term that we use, long-term serviceability. Unleashed does a very good job of right here and now, how is the system performing? Meaning I've got a bunch of client devices connected, I've got 4 or 5 access points, and the devices are moving around and roaming properly and doing all those things. It does a very good job of that. But as soon as that doesn't work, there's a limited amount of tools in Unleashed to see what's going on and figure out the issues compared to the Access Network C120. That C120 has way deeper troubleshooting tools, and it's all about long-term serviceability. How effective, as Nathan put it, how effective am I in servicing my client, and what's the lift for my company to do that?
And if I've got logs that go back and say, hey, a customer calls and says at 9 p.m. every day I'm having an issue with my wireless controller, I have logs that I can dive into that and be able to see what's happening at that time with that device. Maybe they're getting interference to the neighbor every day when he comes home. Okay.
Turns on his microwave,
Whatever it is, it could be you're seeing interference on one channel every single day. These are real realities that we see that without having the proper tools are very difficult to diagnose.
Right. You need the controller in place so you can get the job done if there are problems, interference down the line.
Yeah, and as an integrator, a lot of what you do is you develop these processes that allow you to be super efficient. The idea is if a customer calls with a question or complaint, you want to be able to immediately not just identify the issue, but be able to resolve it, not just guess. If you reboot something, all you're doing is resetting a timer, and this issue is going to come back. It's going to resurface. So the key to it is if I'm deploying wireless controllers on every single project, I know intimately how they function, where I'm going. If a customer calls an issue, oh, this is not what I normally see. I can go there very quickly and have the granularity to diagnose what's causing the problem. Unleashed gives you all the access to the same access points, but less of the ability to diagnose exactly what's going on.
Yep.
So it's less efficient.
Now, we kind of talked about this last question earlier, and this is more not necessarily a technical question, but more specific to what our company does and how we support our clients. What qualifies for a site survey? When do we come in and actually say, hey, you know, a client requests it from us, but what is qualifying a site survey?
The money.
Yeah.
Well, look, we've done small projects where the homeowner's like, I just want to guarantee this, to very large projects where the homeowner's like, I want to make sure we completely do this right. It all comes down to what is the client interested, how important is it to the client? What are they willing to spend? Do they just want to say, hey, you tell me what the best solution is and I'll go with it, and we just write it down? Or do they want to say, we understand from what you've told us that there's a lot of variables that can go into this. We would like you to come in and actually analyze exactly what we have to ensure that when this goes in, it performs exactly as we expected. Or on top of that, they go, okay, we've already done that, and now you've installed everything, but we just want that satisfaction that says, now that everything's installed, now that everything's good, can you come in and do a verification survey to make sure that every bit of everything not only was installed correctly, but is out of the box working as expected?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I mean, Bobby, this is part of your new role, your new venture within your awesome company. So I mean, like, we don't want to go out and say, hey, everybody needs a site survey. We don't necessarily want that.
Well, Bobby would love that to happen.
Well, Bobby, you'll be on
10
the
acres at a time.
I mean, what's your perspective, Bobby? I mean, you've been on all sides of the game, sales. You've been an integrator as well. So I mean, what's your point of view on this?
I think the biggest thing for what I get out of site surveys is knowing what I don't know, right? A lot of times when we go in there, we have that preconceived notion that the access points are located exactly where they need to be, and they're not. So when you start when you're actually going through and doing the survey with your laptop attached to your chest, and you can see the results and you can immediately know that something's wrong, it's very satisfying. And that's when you start to geek out a little bit and say, hey, I found something bad, and then you can try to fix it, or make your suggestions of how to fix it. And that was one of the really cool things that we were able to do at this previous site survey that we just did with Nathan and I. The homeowner was all about like, hey, just temporarily put these access points where they really need to be on ladders. I don't care. I just need to be able to make these phone calls because I'm running my business out of my home right now. Right. So it's very satisfying, especially when the initial thing that when you walk into the meeting with the homeowner, you've never met them, and the first thing is out of his mouth is that this Wi-Fi sucks. I think I bought the worst Wi-Fi system ever. And you're like, that's not true. There's no way this is true. But when you start going through the actual survey and you're seeing everything happening in real time, that's where you can see the holes and where the access points really need to be in those different locations. So yeah, that's very satisfying to me.
Bryce, do you think we're going to start seeing more site survey requests now that everybody's running a business from home?
Yeah, well, not just that reason though. There's a bigger reason that's beyond this current situation that we're in with the pandemic and all that kind of stuff. The bigger situation is differentiation. So a lot of integration companies are trying to figure out how to differentiate themselves from whoever else is in their market and selling, in concept, selling the same thing they're selling. Right. And a while ago, it was about in this industry specific, we got into this whole thing about documentation. D-tools. We got into a lot of integrators are buying into D-tools because now they can provide these documentation packages that were unlike most of their competitors. Their competitors were putting things in Word documents or just showing up with hey, just sign my piece of paper and I'll start working on your house. This is a very basic way of doing business. And what's that?
I got a guy.
Yeah, I got a guy. I know this guy down the street. He can put this stuff in for you. You know, it's like great. Okay, well, you know, do I write him a check now or when he's done? Well, no, you write him the check now. Well, how do I know he's coming in tomorrow? You know, like all that kind of conversation. So with differentiation comes capabilities, right? Companies' capabilities are greater. They are more proficient. Their jobs are more successful because they're following standards-based deployments. And site surveys is, I think, the next wave, along with what we're seeing, what, you know, Nathan and I have known about, and a lot of other guys that came from the commercial side of the industry have known about for years and years and years, which is cable certification. It's not a standard practice in residential. A lot of guys do pair tests. They don't do certification. They don't actually physically run a certifying tool on all of their cable runs. And these two things are going to be what, you know, that and site surveys are going to be what starts to differentiate the big boys from the guys who are just kind of in it to make a living. And
Yes.
The guys that are in it, the big boys that are in it to actually create a business model and have a business that they can sell long-term, you know, off to one of their employees or to an investor, are the guys that are going to invest in these kind of ideas. And they're going to differentiate themselves from their competitors, and they're going to provide documentation after documentation that shows why they did what they did and prove that it works and deliver a product that actually works when they're done. It's not 95% done. It's not 98% done. It's 100% done, and all the documentation proves it. So I think that the wave that we'll see initially will be this being outsourced. We'll get a lot of requests, and we're already starting to see that. We're getting a lot more requests for site surveys in the first few months of 2020 than we've had in, you know, probably the last half of 2019. So, and then you're going to start seeing these guys want to do it themselves, want to train their people, want to invest in the materials, want to invest in the technologies that they need to do it, and then include it in how they go to market, and not have to outsource it.
I was just saying, I think when you look at we sometimes forget how small the world that our clients live in is, and they all talk. And if, you know, you go over to your friend's house and the Wi-Fi is perfect and it's always perfect, they're going to go, hey, who did your Wi-Fi? Oh, they did this. Really? Well, what'd they do differently? Well, they did, you know, we had a survey, we did all this, blah, blah, blah. The people start questioning, why didn't my AV firm do this? Why, you know, and all of a sudden it starts to become, if every single one of their friends is having success because it was being done right, you're having a survey, you're having a verification, you're having all these things, they start questioning why am I using a firm that isn't doing this, / why isn't my firm doing this? So I think we're definitely going to see, we saw it in theaters, you know, years ago. If you built a theater and just kind of slapped things in, you had a certain experience. If you hired a company that was professionally tuning the room and using not just sound deadening material, but acoustically treating it for make it a live room and all these things. It was a very different experience. And you got to know who was the professionals that really knew the industry. And that's what they did, is make a good name for themselves. And the same thing will happen here.
Yeah, the same thing happened with hip replacements.
Yeah.
I am sure you're all sitting there going, what? But the same thing happened with hip replacements. So they used to do hip replacements through the back. When I had to have my hip replacement, they were doing them through the front because it was a much shorter recovery time, less muscle displaced. And now they've actually created a newer way of doing it, which is through the side of the hip. And it's even less invasive. So it's the same concept. Like, I had people that are much older than me asking me who did my hip replacement. And I'm telling them, hey, go to this guy because he does it through the front. And they're like, well, I heard about this guy that does it through the side. And it's much, you know, it's like the same concept. People talk, and they're always looking for the best way to get from point A to point B with being the least invasive. And having a company that does a site survey for you will be less invasive in your house long-term than one that doesn't.
Sure.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many, you know, when I was in LA, how many celebrity clients you have. And, you know, they want things, they're accustomed to just saying, hey, make this, you know, I signed a contract with you, it just has to work. And they don't want you to ever be back in their home again, not because of anything other than, you know, they don't like you. This is their private space. They don't want to be disturbed if they can avoid it. And they buy these systems so that they can escape the stresses of reality, not create new stresses. So not only does this ensure that you have less service calls, and, you know, you ensure that you have a client that has a better experience where they can actually, you know, your network becomes invisible to their life. So therefore becomes a benefit and not a detriment.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yes, I completely agree with that.
I'm glad we had this time to chat, guys, and actually kind of see you face to face.
Yes,
I mean,
it was awesome.
this isn't new for our team. Half of us work remotely, but these conversations are good for us in-house, but also great for our clients as well. Y'all want to add anything?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to let everybody know who I am because we didn't do that at the beginning. Who I am and how to get a hold of me. So I'm Bryce Nordstrand. I'm the Chief Sales Officer for Access Networks, so all things sales and marketing. These guys are part of my team. Actually, all three of you are part of my team, and I appreciate you all for being on here and doing this with us. You can contact me at the office number or Bryce at accessnetworks.com.
Nathan?
My name is Nathan Holmes. I'm the Director of Training and Development for Access Networks. So any training programs for integrators, any training programs from a technical perspective, we can help. That's my world. Bobby will introduce himself, works on my team, and we handle pretty much the bridge between sales and engineering.
Yes.
Bobby G.
So I'm Bobby G, or Bobby Gimnerath, sorry, but I go by Bobby G. So if you want to get a hold of me, it's bobby.gimnerath at accessnetworks.com. How'd you get Bryce at accessnetworks.com?
Original gangster, yo.
OG style.
I was Nathan and got I was like the first employee that they mandated first and last name.
Ah, look at that.
You're late to the party, Bobby.
Well, we can't use mic at because there's like 15 mics in the company.
Oh, that's true. That's on them.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. So no, this is a lot of fun. I am partner training and development manager. I work under Nathan Holmes, and this team that we have right now is going to be amazing. I see some really cool things that we're going to be doing down the pipe. Nathan has a lot of great ideas, and just we're getting to the point where we can start implementing some of them. So I'm excited.
Yeah. Good stuff, guys.
Very good stuff.
I'm Alicia. I am an associate sales engineer, and I have my hands in a little bit of everything. You can reach me personally at alicia.henley@accessnetworks.com, but the best way to get a hold of all of us is where?
Client services.
Okay, thank you. Client services at accessnetworks.com. Thanks, everybody. And before we go, I want to share something fun that our company did within our Slack channel. If you're free, go to Google, put in your first name followed by Glamour Shots, and share it with us, because this has been taken off in our Slack channel, and it's the absolute most funniest thing. Bryce has even put his little Slack avatar as his Glamour Shot from Google. So if you have some time and just need a good laugh.
Yeah, it's probably one of the creepiest glamour shots you'll ever see. For a middle-aged
You
man.
have a good point. I mean, right now with everything going on, with all of this self-quarantining and all this stuff, I think it's so important to bring a little bit of levity and just humor back into things. If you don't do that, it can get serious real quick. And everything we talked about, yes, it's math this, math that, but these things allow us to have fun.
Yeah, just remember the work still gets done. It just gets done differently.
Yes.
Yep.
Here we go. Keeping you connected.